Hello, everyone. Your prevailing moment for today is entitled Prevailing as Queen, and I'll be reading from Esther chapter 4, verses 13 through 14. And Mordecai told them to answer Esther, "Do not think in your hearts that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" I encourage you to read the entire book of Esther. This will be a two-part message as I will be highlighting scripture throughout this book to illustrate my points. So let's begin with part one. March is our annual recognition of Women's History Month. And I have a confession. I am a female superhero fan. That's right. Whether it's Marvel Comics or DC Comics or some other movie where the woman is the leading character, I am all about it. I am all for watching a woman demonstrate physical strength, intellectual prowess, dominate the scene, and command attention without uttering a word. When you are the star, the leading lady, and queen of the scene, your presence exudes authority. You know who is running the show. I am a fan of women in leadership, especially women leading in industries or professions that are primarily dominated by men. Lastly, I am in awe of every woman who has submitted to the daunting call of ministry on any level. It is not easy for us, but great is our reward. Each type of woman has experiences in her life where they rise to the occasion and become queen of the day. The superhero, the one who made the right decision at the right time, was intentional, strategic, intervened, thwarted a plan, took the risk, used her position of influence, exerted her power and authority to make something good happen, even something miraculous. In those rare and profound moments of realizing the risk were worth it, your triumph, your victory, and success means you have prevailed. This embodies the experience seen in the book of Esther. Queen Esther was in this exact position when her cousin Mordecai makes it known that her people were going to be destroyed. She chose to use all of her queenly powers to spring into action on behalf of her people. Esther had a choice, and Mordecai helped her realize that she would not be exempt from the destruction that was imminent. So, here's a little context just to understand how she arrived at this place. Esther's ascension to royalty came because her predecessor was dethroned for failing to submit to the king's request. This plot to destroy her people happened 5 years after Esther had become queen. Esther had never revealed her ethnic origin. It had been concealed up until this moment when it was necessary to put all her cards on the table to save her people. Here's another fact. Esther was not the queen's original name. Her original name was Hadassah, meaning myrtle, but she lived up to the Persian name given to her, which means star. Efforts were made throughout the kingdom to find a new queen. So, beautiful virgins were gathered to aid in the selection process. From the moment that Esther was taken to the palace, she found favor with the keeper of the harem. She was set apart with special beauty preparations beyond what was allowed. She was given the best place in the house out of all the women. She was coached when it was time for her to go in to see the king. She followed instructions, and that won the heart of the king. And this is how she became his new queen. But for every queen, there is a defining moment in her life, and Esther came face to face with hers when Mordecai informed her of the king's decree, which was based upon a conspiracy of lies. Queen Esther did what a queen does. She reigned and ruled from her position of influence. She overcame, she conquered, and yes, she prevailed. So, what does it mean to prevail as queen? What did Queen Esther do to demonstrate what it means to prevail as queen? Well, from my reading, there are at least 6 things Queen Esther did to demonstrate what it means to prevail as queen. And so the first one is here. A prevailing queen knows that fasting and prayer are essential when you need the Lord to move on your behalf. And so we see this in scripture. After Mordecai says to Esther, "Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Esther replies back in verse 16 saying, "Go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise." Well, while scripture does not explicitly say she prayed, we believe that the two go hand in hand and that is an implied thing that she did. All throughout scripture and in the Old Testament, prayer accompanies fasting. In Ezra chapter 8, verse 23, it says, "So we fasted and petitioned our God about this, and he answered our prayer." So we believe that a prevailing queen knows that fasting and prayer are essential and that Esther relied upon that to help her in her decision. So, number 2, a prevailing queen is willing to take all necessary risks. The operative word is necessary. Her actions became necessary. You will notice in verse 16 that Queen Esther makes an intentional decision and counts up the cost. She says, "And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Here's what we can take away. If we have to take a risk, make sure it is necessary. She knew the laws and the expectations and moved forward in faith. Third, a prevailing queen knows how, when, and where to get in position. Queen Esther knew when, where, and how to position herself in order to gain the king's attention. In chapter 5, verses 1 through 2, it says, "Now it happened on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, across from the king's house, while the king sat on his royal throne in his royal house, facing the entrance of the house. So it was, when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she found favor in his sight." Do you see the specificity outlined in these verses? We need to discern and learn how, when, and where to position ourselves in order to gain the right attention. Hear this. How we show up matters in any space. When we show up matters. Where we show up matters. Presentation and representation is everything. It is true that you do not get a second chance to make a first impression. And so, ladies, I'm going to be real with you. How we dress matters. When and where we wear certain types of clothes, it sends a message, good or bad, like it or not. Where we wear them says something about who and what attention we are trying to seek. Learning from Queen Esther, she put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace while the king was sitting on his royal throne facing the entrance. She meant to get his attention in the most effective way possible. And sometimes we put on certain things because we mean to get attention in the most effective way possible. And sometimes it's the wrong kind of attention. So if we want to take our cues from Queen Esther, let's show up authentically and on purpose and in ways that garner the best results possible for our lives. So far, we have learned that in order to prevail as a queen, that means knowing that fasting and prayer are essential to unleashing God's power. Secondly, a prevailing queen is willing to take all necessary risk, and a prevailing queen knows when, how, and where to get in position. Queen Esther raised the standard. Let us do likewise. I'm Dr. Samantha Murphy, and this is part 1 of your prevailing moment, Prevailing as Queen. Be sure to check out part 2.